Our preseason top 25 after week 0 is officially here. And before we get into the actual rankings, we're going to go ahead and look at a few teams who just missed out on being ranked for us. And first up out of those is going to be Washington, Michigan, and Ole Miss. These three are all pretty similar. They're talented teams, had pretty solid seasons last year. Even though Michigan's was a little bit rougher, they finished on a solid two-game win streak over two very good teams. And the common theme for these guys is just having young quarterbacks who are not yet proven. And for that reason, we did not rank them. And I think they'll have probably the best chance to quickly get into the top 25, especially if they look good early on in the season. Michigan's got a great opportunity early against Oklahoma specifically. Ole Miss plays Kentucky pretty early on. So a few of these teams have good opportunities to get ranked. Just we cannot justify ranking them right now.
Another group is TCU and Georgia Tech. Both these teams have returning starting quarterbacks with a lot of experience. Josh Hoover for the Horned Frogs and Haynes King for Georgia Tech. The potential for these teams is very, very high given that returning amount of production, but they did lose a couple contributors on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, whether it was the transfer portal or to the NFL draft. And while we do think they will both be very solid and dark horse contenders in their respective conferences, it's a little too early to say that they are going to be top 25 teams, but I wouldn't be surprised, just like Washington, Ole Miss, and Michigan, if we see them jump into the top 25 fairly quickly. And then the last group is going to be Utah, Oregon State, and Duke. And the common theme for these teams is that they have solid transfer quarterbacks coming in. Utah brings in Devin Dampier, Oregon State brings in Malik Murphy, and Duke brings in Darian Mensah, all quarterbacks that have starting experience as well. That's the difference. So once again, could easily see these teams getting into the top 25 early on, especially in the case of a team like Duke, who plays Illinois in week 2. They are able to get a very big win over the Illini. We could easily see them jump into the top 25 very, very quickly.
Speaking of that top 25, here it is. Got two ACC teams at the bottom of the rankings, SMU and Louisville. SMU made the college football playoffs last year, brought back Kevin Jennings at their starting quarterback position. Overall, still a very solid roster, definitely deserved to be ranked, and that's why we slid them in here just at the very end of the poll. Louisville at 24, lost Tyler Schuff to the NFL draft, replaced him with Miller Moss, the transfer quarterback from USC. I think he's going to have a pretty solid season. They're going to have a solid offense, but there's still other teams in the ACC that are definitely better than both of these guys. They were just worthy enough of being ranked in our top 25 at 24 and 25.
Boise State gets in at 23 after a phenomenal season last year on the back of Ashton Jeanty. And even though Jeanty is off to the NFL, they returned so much starting production on offense outside of him, including returning Maddox Madsen as their starting quarterback. Boise State will be a very good team once again this season. And even though we considered UNLV a bit of a threat to them in the Mountain West, with the way they looked against Idaho State, FCS opponent in week 0, Boise State might be in firm control of their destiny in the conference. Once again, we could see them going undefeated, but we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. At 22, we have Pittsburgh, who has Eli Holstein returning, Desmond Reed as well at the starting running back position. It's going to be a very good offense. The defense was very good through the first half of the season last year, but obviously they had that tremendous collapse, losing 6 games in a row, including that bowl game to Toledo. They need to figure out how to not be such a streaky team and win some of those bigger games. But with that amount of returning production, Pittsburgh could easily be a dark horse contender in the ACC as well. And then Kansas State comes in at 21 after falling to Iowa State in Dublin in week 0. And a lot of it was their own mistakes, unnecessary turnovers, not being able to capitalize on the mistakes of Iowa State. But still a very good team. Avery Johnson had a slow start in the rough weather conditions, but still looked fairly solid. I do think this Kansas State team will turn it around fairly quickly because they have to, given that their first loss was to a ranked opponent and in conference. Kansas State will come in at 21.
And speaking of that ranked opponent, there they are at number 20. Iowa State, very solid win to start the year over Kansas State. kind of Connor talked about most of the points from this game. I thought Rocco Becht looked really good at the start, cooled off a little bit towards the end of the first half, a lot of that due to the weather. The Iowa State offense looked just fine in the second half. I think that they're going to have a really solid season this year. So that's why we got him in here at number 20. Miami at number 19, Carson Beck transferring in to be the starter. And I think that while he may not be Cam Ward, he's still going to be very, very good. Miami's definitely a top 20 team, and they have a tough start to the year with a game against Notre Dame, but it's definitely one they're going to be able to compete in. That one, though, could potentially cost them their top 25 spot just because they're ranked so low if they do end up losing it. Number 18 going to be Texas Tech. And I think the Red Raiders going to have a very solid season this year. Number two transfer portal class in the nation, returning their starting quarterback as well in Baron Morton. Lost their starting running back for the season already, which is very, very tough news. But they've always been a very passing heavy team. So I think that while it's definitely going to hurt them, it might not completely take them out of the running in the Big 12. Still going to have a very solid season, but we do have them here at number 18.
Indiana, after a tremendous season last year in year one under Kurt Signetti, comes in at 17. And they brought in Fernando Mendoza to be their starting quarterback. It was expected to be a high draft pick in next year's NFL draft. And he has a very solid weapon as well in Elijah Surratt, who's going to be one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten. But the questions for Indiana comes really with, can they repeat the magic they had last year with a significantly more difficult schedule, particularly in the Big Ten? I don't think they will be able to. I think with a transfer quarterback coming in, there might be some growing pains and a bit of a slow start for Indiana. Granted, they do have a very easy non-conference schedule, so that won't affect them too much. But I don't think Indiana will be nearly as good as they were last year, but still will be a solid team and one that will be competitive in the Big Ten. And then at 16, Texas A&M. Every single year, Texas A&M gets so much hype, and they do have good reason for it, considering that Marcel Reed is a young and upcoming quarterback. Looked fairly solid through some point last year, but still needs to work on his game. And then defensively, Texas A&M had a really solid pass rush. They lost a couple of those key players, but if they're able to turn some of their younger guys into those elite pass rushers as well, then A&M will have a very good defense. They just have such a tough schedule as well. I do think that the lack of experience on Marcel Reed's part too might play a key factor in some of their bigger games this season. I do think there's a lot of potential for the Aggies, but they always seem to fall short, so they're going to come in at number 16.
Number 15 is Oklahoma. There was a little bit of drama with John Montier, but it looks to be all fine. He's going to be the starting quarterback, the transfer from Washington State. We saw how that panned out last year with Cam Ward. I'm not saying Montier's as good, but he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in college football this season. So I think Oklahoma's pretty set there. They got Jaden Ott at running back as well, also going to be very, very good. So I think that Oklahoma is definitely going to be back this season after having a pretty rough year last season. They did pull off one upset though against Alabama, and unfortunately for the Sooners, that's the team ranked just in front of them. I think in year two under Kalen DeBoer, they're going to have a great season. Alabama definitely had an off year by their standards last year. This season very well could be right back in the mix in the college football playoffs. I think that they are going to have a very, very good year once again this season. Ty Simpson, the starting quarterback. It's going to be a young team, but I trust Kalen DeBoer to kind of start figuring things out now that he's been at the program and really understands what Alabama is all about.
And at number 13, to some people's surprise, we have Baylor. And this team just has so much returning production from last season. They have their starting quarterback returning in Sawyer Robertson. They have both their starting running backs. They have Sawyer Robertson's number one weapon in Josh Cameron also returning. They have a great offensive line as well. The defense did lose a couple people, but is still going to look fairly solid. This team won 6 games in a row to finish off the year last year before falling to LSU in their bowl game. If they're able to replicate that win streak throughout the majority of the season here, especially against some of their better Big 12 opponents, then Baylor could find themselves in the Big 12 championship game with that amount of experience. Big 12 is a chaotic conference as well, so you never know what to expect. It's a little risky to have them above Alabama, but we're going to lean with an experienced starting quarterback in the same system compared to a quarterback that, even though he has been at the program for a couple seasons, has not been the starter right away. Alabama might have the firepower with Ryan Williams, but we like Baylor and what they bring to the table. And speaking of firepower, at number 12, we have Florida. And this is really going to be a tough team to rank because Florida's season completely hinges on DJ Lagway. He has to stay healthy and play just as good as he did last year, if not better, against such a tough schedule. If he is the Heisman candidate that Joan and I both think he can be, then Florida could easily be a top 10 team with this roster that they have. But without DJ Lagway, we saw the Gators struggle last season, and they could slip down our rankings and maybe even fall to an unranked team if they lose some of those bigger games. But I have faith in this Florida team. I think they will do fairly well this season, even against such a tough schedule. And that's why we have them at number 12. And then number 11 is the Fighting Illini. After a very productive season last year, they returned their starting quarterback in Luke Altmaier, who led them to a win over an SEC team in their bowl game, that being South Carolina, who is a very good team in their own right. I think Illinois does have some potential this year to cause some chaos in the Big Ten, but with some people saying that they will be this year's Indiana, I don't really think that is possible given their schedule because they have much tougher Big Ten opponents this year, including Ohio State, Washington, and having to play Indiana. But Illinois definitely could cause some chaos this year, and I do think they will be fairly good because of so much returning production. They just need to find some explosive weapons in the wide receiver room for Luke Altmaier to use.
At number 10 is the Oregon Ducks. This is a little bit lower than I've seen them ranked in other places, but I do think that it is a little bit justified. This team lost a lot of production from last season, and they are going to be starting Dante Moore, who is going to be brand new to this Oregon system as a starter. He was there last year, had a little bit of time to develop. It's definitely going to be quite a learning curve to actually being the starting quarterback. So I think Oregon might struggle a little bit early on in the season. They have a few very tough games this year as well. The Ducks should still be a playoff team, but they're going to have a much more difficult time getting there this season than they did last year. Number 9 going to be South Carolina. Lenoris Sellers returning at quarterback. He had a very, very good year last season. And the Gamecocks almost made their way into the college football playoffs. This season, I think they have a very chance to have at least as good of a season as they did last year, potentially even better. They're going to have a tough schedule to get there, but if they can do it, they have a very good chance of hosting a playoff game. And I think the Gamecocks are going to be right in the thick of it this season. Just a great roster. Lenora Sellers, like I said, he's a potential Heisman candidate. So South Carolina definitely deserves this top 10 spot. Coming in at number 8, going to be Notre Dame, the runners-up from last year's national championship. Going to be starting a young quarterback in CJ Carr, but he has Jeremiah Love to lean on at the running back position. And I think Love is going to be one of the favorites for the Heisman Trophy that is not a quarterback, one of the best players in all of college football. So Notre Dame's going to have guys that they can rely on the offense as CJ Carr continues to learn and develop as a starting quarterback. The defense is going to be very good once again. Marcus Freeman's got himself another very solid team, definitely worthy of a top 10 ranking.
Number 7, we have the Georgia Bulldogs, and under Kirby Smart, Georgia has always been a powerhouse in college football. But this year is going to be a bit of a turning point, and we will really see what Georgia is made of, considering that Gunnar Stockton will be their starting quarterback, and he's not the most talented quarterback that Georgia has had the past few seasons. Although he did help them beat Texas in the SEC championship game, he did not look very good when they played against Notre Dame in the college football playoffs. Maybe in a year where the offense is completely built around him and he knows the playbook in and out, he will be able to succeed. But all that being said, I don't think this will be one of the better Georgia offenses we will see. But on the defensive side of the ball, Georgia always turns out a good defense, especially under Kirby Smart. That will keep them in games. That will allow Gunnar Stockton to ease into it a little bit. And even though they do play a pretty difficult schedule, Georgia is still going to be one of the best teams in the country. So they come in at number 7. And then number 6 is going to be Arizona State. And this is going to be fairly high for Arizona State compared to what a lot of other people will have them ranked at. But Arizona State returns 17 starters from last season, including Sam Levitt at the starting quarterback position and Jordan Tyson at the starting wide receiver position. Jordan Tyson is arguably the second or third best wide receiver in the country, depending on how you feel about him and Ryan Williams, but one of the best wide receivers in college football. And even though they did lose Cam Scadaboo, I still think this offense is going to be very, very good, even if they have to replace such a big portion of that offense from last season. If they're able to keep the magic going from last season after being picked to finish last in the Big 12, then I think Arizona State can still be that buzzsaw of a team that we saw last year. It's going to be a little difficult in the Big 12 considering how many teams are absolutely loaded this year with returning production or bringing in solid transfer classes. But Arizona State does have the weapons to compete with any team out there, so they come in at number 6, just outside of our top 5.
At number 5, going to be the LSU Tigers, one of the best teams coming into college football this season. You got Garrett Nussmeier, one of the favorites for the Heisman, and just all around, he's got a ton of weapons to throw to. They're going to have a great defense this season. LSU has one of the toughest environments to play in. I think the Tigers are definitely one of the best teams in the country. Number 4 is Penn State, some of the most returning production from last season outside of Arizona State. I think that the Nittany Lions are in for a very, very good season this year. They're going to have to beat Ohio State for the first time in almost 10 years, but they have a great chance to do it this year with Drew Aller returning, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, maybe finally having a wide receiver that Aller can throw to instead of just his tight end every year. I think the defense is going to be incredible with the addition of Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator, who led the #1 defense on a national championship team last season. The Nittany Lions are definitely going to be a top 5 team in college football. And you got Clemson at number 3. This is actually setting up a top 5 matchup by our rankings for week 1 with Clemson and LSU. And I think Cade Klubnik, a very, very good quarterback, one of the favorites for the Heisman up there with Nussmeier. I believe they are 1 and 2. They also have 2 of the best defensive ends in the country. Potentially 3 top 5 draft picks in 2026 will come from this Clemson team. Just all around, Clemson is going to have a very scary roster this year. And I think they're a little bit better than Penn State. I trust Cade Klubnik a little bit more than Drew Aller, which is why we have them above the Nittany Lions. Those two specifically were very close. I think this top 4 is definitely separate from the 5 through 10 range in my mind.
And number 2 is going to be the defending national champs in the Ohio State Buckeyes. And it will be an interesting year for the Buckeyes with Julian Sayin stepping up to be the starting quarterback. And while he does have all the hype in the world, he does have to step into a tough playing environment with so many expectations on his shoulders. But he does have one of the best offenses in the country to work with. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes as his wide receivers, a really solid running back room as well with CJ Donaldson, James Peoples, and Bo Jackson. Brian Hartline stepping up as the offensive coordinator. I think he will do a pretty good job there, working with Julian Sayin in the wide receiver room to make sure Ohio State has just as much of an explosive offense as they did last year. And then defensively, they still have a lot of good returning starters. Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, arguably the best defensive player in the country. They got Bo Atkinson in the transfer portal as well. Ohio State always retools and looks very good every single year. But like Jonas said, this is a pretty close group of teams between Ohio State, Clemson, and Penn State. If you want to go with Clemson or Penn State ahead of the Buckeyes, I can see that considering they have more returning experience at some key positions. But we are honoring the fact that Ohio State won a national championship last year and has a good amount of that team returning. But at number 1, setting up a number 1 versus number 2 matchup in week 1, we have the Texas Longhorns. I think they are a step above a lot of teams this year. Even though Arch Manning has some questions on if he can deliver on everything that has been promised of him as the starting quarterback for the Longhorns, I do think the rest of this team is just so good that even if Arch Manning isn't the next coming of Johnny Manziel or Vince Young or any other great quarterback that went on to win the Heisman and was the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. He doesn't have to be all that. He just needs to be good enough to get the playmakers on this Texas team the ball and to let the defense do the work as well. Because Steve Sarkisian has built another tremendous defense this year with so many young, talented players. I really do not see how anyone could put Texas any lower than number one. They are the definitive number one team going into week one this year. It's going to be a great matchup against the Buckeyes. I mean, you will see who comes out on top because that will end up changing the rankings quite a bit. But for right now, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of our content, and we will see you in the next video.